to another Beckfoot Lifelong Learners podcast. We have another extra special guest today who's going to be talking to us about more practical stuff that's going to be happening in the classroom. So hopefully we'll all have some fab takeaways from the topic today. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, Molly, and we'll go from there?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Molly. I've been at Beckfoot now. This is my third year. I'm an English teacher. I also coordinate the student magazine, The Buzz. And I'm here to talk about using mini whiteboards in classrooms.
Lovely. So that's perfect. Can't wait to get stuck into all that. But before we get going with the mini whiteboard stuff, as this is the Beckfoot Lifelong Learners podcast, we always start with the same kind of vibe. Like, is there something that you have learned recently that's could be something from outside of the workplace, or it could be something that's impacted you at work, impacted you in life, something that you've learned recently or in your career so far?
Yeah, I've learned two things. One, not work related, but perhaps interesting for our viewers, that in Happy Valley, Tommy Lee Royce is not actually from Yorkshire, which I didn't know. But secondly, work related, this is my first year as being a mentor for our ITTs. I've never done it before, and it's something that I've really wanted to do. So I went on a course towards the end of last week about how to structure mentor meetings and how to be more supportive with your ITT and how to help them in their career. And they talked about this topic of tame your advice monster. And
I'm sensing another podcast.
Yeah. And as they were talking, I was sat there thinking, I do that. And I'm trying to offer advice, but phrasing it in a way that is more, this is how I would do it. Have you thought about doing it like this? So they gave us some really helpful tips of how to be supportive and get the trainee teacher to think about how they would do it and why.
Right.
So phrasing questions differently to get the best out of someone is something I've learned this week, the end of last week.
Oh, shall we have another podcast on that another time? Okay, we'll add it to the list, okay? Because that's something that I think could be, I'm about to ask you, a load of questions, and I'm like, no, rein it back in, let's get back to
I was that nodding going, this is so me.
Literally, because I'm doing an NQT and ITT this year, so it's again a thing like, what about this, I'm like,
and I was like rewinding and thinking, okay, so tell me about what the students have learnt this lesson, talk me through it, instead of going in with quite a leading question.
Cool. Well, we'll come back to that, I think. So today it's all about mini whiteboards. So why do you want to talk about mini whiteboards? You told your year 11s we're going to be on a podcast to talk about mini whiteboards, and they were like, oh, yay. Yeah. But to us, it's quite so exciting.
It is. So 11Y3, this is all about whiteboards. The reason that I want to talk about whiteboards is because of our school ethos, and we talk about no child left behind. I think that mini whiteboards really helps us embed that into our school life, and it allows all students to think about responses and participate in lessons in a different way to how other types of questioning can be used.
Yeah.
So it's about everyone being involved, everyone participating, and you being able to identify who needs that little bit of extra support, who needs perhaps challenging and pushing in a different way. So I just think no child left behind, whiteboards is the way.
And that ties in beautifully to what some of our own learners were saying when we did a podcast with them. Mini whiteboards help them feel safe.
That's it.
And it gives them a chance to check. They feel less like they still get to share their idea in a safer way. It feels less on the spot somehow. So
the word that you said then about feeling safe, it's something that I was going to come to later, but we can start with that.
All right, cool.
That there's this fear, isn't there, around the blank page and starting and getting things wrong.
Yeah.
And I get that when I'm writing a model answer or I'm drafting myself. I sort of think like, how am I going to start? And it's a process that we go through, and perhaps that's something that students can seem quite overwhelmed with. And I think that feeling safe in a classroom is one of the most important things. So whiteboards will definitely help us with that, and it helps us to check students' understanding before they start. So this is going to be my first top tip, that you can use whiteboards to check understanding before students start a task to ensure they feel confident when writing the rest of the piece or doing whatever it is in that particular topic.
Perfect.
So one way that I would use a mini whiteboard is, I'll give you a scenario. So for example, if I was reading a text with a student and I know that I'm going to want them to highlight the key pieces of information, that's like a classic task that will be done in most subjects.
Yeah.
It leads to summarising, but you gather the information first.
I've done covers. It happens in humanities.
Yeah, it happens all over the school. And when I was thinking about this task, I know in my head what the key pieces of information are. So let's say we were looking at Priestley's life in an Inspector Calls, or if it was in history, I'm going to show my my historical knowledge here. Maybe if you were looking at something to do with the Tudors.
Yeah.
And you knew what you wanted your students to pick out. If you set them off and say, okay, as I read this text to you, you're going to highlight the key piece of information. Do they know what that really means, or are they going to highlight when that person was born?
Yeah.
Is that going to help us later in an answer? Probably not. So something where you can use your mini whiteboards is model reading the first part of the text to them. It might be the first 2 sentences. Stop the class and ask them, everyone write on your whiteboards the key word or the key phrase you would have highlighted.
Right.
So they do that, however long that would take. Ask students not to hold their boards up until you ask, so that everyone is thinking for themselves. They hold their boards up and you can quickly see who is highlighting the things you wanted them to, or who has perhaps misunderstood key information and has written the person's age or when they were born.
It's another way of scaffolding.
It is,
scaffolding almost. It's a good sub-step.
Absolutely. And then in order to ensure that doesn't happen again when you read the rest of the text, I would then call upon a student who has written the thing I wanted them to and ask them to justify and explain why that is perhaps more important than something another student has written without naming the other student.
Yeah.
So it's a way of keeping a safe environment, that climate for learning, but also addressing perhaps a misconception before it's too late and they've highlighted all the irrelevant things.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Brilliant.
So just pause, check, and then carry on.
Love it.
Is one tip.
So to sum up, top tip 1 before we go on.
Yeah, so check for understanding. It can be in a short highlighting task, or it could be if you're setting a student off on a longer piece of writing. Often in English we do that all the time, and I know that happens around the school. So a longer piece of writing, ask them to everyone discuss how we might start this piece of writing, and then after, every student write their first sentence on their whiteboard, whether that be analytical or whether it be a piece of creative writing, so that you can check before you set them off on something that they might be writing for 20 minutes, everyone has got the right idea. And again, you can go back to student X, can you explain why you've starting with this extract, whatever they might have said. So for other students, they can then feel confident knowing that what they're about to write has been checked, because starting is so hard and not knowing how to start. So if a student is struggling to put something on their whiteboard, they're going to struggle to write the full thing in their book.
Yes.
So you can immediately see who you need to target.
Brilliant. Oh, I love that one. Perfect. So moving on, top tip 2.
Yeah, top tip number 2 is quick knowledge checks with using whiteboards. So they're for shorter answers. Yeah. So you might have a question like, what year was an Inspector Calls set and what year was it written in? So you're looking for short answers there. It might be true or false quizzing. So you can quickly identify any misconceptions.
Knowledge gaps.
Yeah, gaps in knowledge, exactly. But it goes back to the point I made earlier about really insisting that students don't hold their whiteboard up until you ask them to.
Because you've always got... They're so keen.
Students that really want to show you. But naturally, if that happens, someone's going to look. Of course they are. But it's a natural instinct, isn't it? That if you're still writing, you're going to, because students want to get it right and they want to impress and they want to do a good job.
How do you build routines for that then? Is it just about getting them in habits?
Yeah, that's it. So it takes a while because they're desperate to show you, and that's wonderful. But the point of these knowledge checks is to check everyone. So I use phrases like, everyone write, is it true or false on your whiteboard? And no one hold their whiteboard up until I say, and then I might give them time to write. I'm going to ask you to hold boards up in 3, 2, 1. Show me board.
Right, countdown.
Yeah, so they know it's coming, and also no student would then, when they hear the countdown on 2, go like this.
Yes.
Because in society, we've learned that when it gets to 1, it comes after that. So I use a countdown to embed that. And that kind of style of whiteboard checking can be used across the school for all different types of questioning, true or false, checking key dates. It might be that you're going to use it as a springboard for later. So if I'd written something, I put a piece of creative writing on the board and I say to my class, which is the most effective verb in this opening? Which one is creating the biggest impact for the reader? Everyone think. So they'd read the opening. You might have modelled reading it to them. On their whiteboards, I'd then say, everyone now write the most effective vocabulary choice on your whiteboard. And count down again. 3, 2, 1. Show me boards. And yes, I'm checking their understanding of how vocabulary can be used for impact, but I'm going to extend that later. So I'd ask a student who's put a correct answer, can you explain to me what impact this word has? How is it used in this sentence? And use questioning and cold calling there to pick a student who can extend that answer. But it also clarifies it for a student who's perhaps picked the wrong choice. And it might not be a wrong choice. It might just be a less effective choice. So it allows you to distinguish between how effective vocabulary can be, and as a writer thinking about deliberate choices that people make for certain reasons. So it could work for creative writing and just asking students to extend their answer.
Love it.
That's my top tip number 2.
Great. So with that, we've had 2 really good insights there into mini whiteboards. To wrap it up, is there a third you could give us?
Yeah, so there's a third, and this ties into a 15-minute forum that I did last year. And the 2 top tips I've talked about are for much more shorter answers.
Yes.
This is for developing a student's writing and perhaps a more extended piece of writing.
Yeah, because you think, do I bother for something so long because some of the BTEC answers and the Cambridge National answers are more extended. How do we get around that with a mini whiteboard there? So this would be a good one too.
Good. So I use mini whiteboards because there's that fear of the blank page again, and drafting and editing. I have seen students who would prefer to rip a page out of their book than to cross out and change. And that's heartbreaking because when I'm writing answers, I change it all the time. And if it's on the computer, delete, change, cross out. So to rip a page out, there's something wrong there. And there's something where we need to build in confidence for a student. So my third top tip is about drafting using a mini whiteboard. So I might pose a question to the class. It can be analytical. How is Romeo presented at the start of the play? Here's a quotation that we're going to use. Everyone on your whiteboard, I would like you to write the analysis that you would write for this quotation. Consider X, Y, Z, whatever it may be you want them to think about. And on their whiteboard, they've got one thing to think about. I'm writing the analysis. Or it might be something more creative. I would like everyone to write the opening to their description of this frightening scene, whatever it may be. So they've got one thing, opening or analysis on the whiteboard.
This contract type. I'm just thinking of my unit for my BTEC.
So you might give them, if it's one particular sport, there to write about one thing, and every student is doing the same task. So as they're writing on their whiteboards, I'd make it clear how you want them to write it. Is it in sentences? Is it in a mind map format? Is it in bullet points? Just so everyone's doing the same thing. Whilst that's happening, on your larger whiteboard, I just draw a horizontal line across the board. I think of it as like a sliding scale.
Okay.
So I draw a line all the way across the board, and underneath it, I would write a simplified, student-friendly mark scheme for that particular question. Okay. So if it's your evaluate question, I don't know how many marks it's out of, it might be 1 to 3 marks is this, 4 to whatever, and I'd plot it on under there. I might just have 3 bits.
My pass, my merit, my distinction,
exactly.
Key bits, yeah.
Exactly, so the key bits, and then briefly the criteria to hit that point in the mark scheme, but student friendly. So it might be towards this end, I might be putting multisyllabic vocabulary, so words with more syllables in, carefully chosen, whereas here it might be cliche phrasing or something. It depends what subject you're teaching, something your students are familiar with. So I'd bullet point that underneath. Students are writing their answer. They've got a time, however long that might be. Everyone stops at the same point. Whilst they're writing, you've gone around and you've seen what students have been putting. Some will be more developed. Some will be the right idea, but need a bit of padding out in certain areas. 3, 2, 1, everyone hold their boards up. I would then select 3 students' whiteboards. No one rubs anything out. You select 3 whiteboards of students that you think will be happy to have their answer, because we don't want to make anyone feel like, oh, this is wrong. Yeah. But so I'd carefully choose which students I'm going to pick. And I'd take one board at a time. I'd read it to the class, and we would decide in pairs as a class where on our sliding scale we're going to put it and why. And I'd blue tack it to the board.
So
they're going to decide where to put it. They can discuss why it's there. And we do that with a few of them. We choose one after this. And as a class, discuss how we can move it up the scale. What choices do we have to make as writers, or as for analysing? What choices do we make to move it up the scale? As a class, they'd discuss. I'd then take that board, stick it under my visualiser, and edit it with them. I'd be rubbing things out on that board and changing it.
Yeah.
Then I'd say to students, with your answer, you are now going to edit it on your whiteboard to move it to the next band, whatever that may be. And there's just something about rubbing out instead of it being permanently in a book and crossing out. And eventually, we will have to get to the book. But it's about building that confidence of changing things and that being okay. And even ones that if they all write such fabulous answers and they're all towards this side of the line, well, brilliant. How do we take it one step further? How do we include something else? And it's about talking to the students about those changes and them seeing that it's all right to rub it out. To make mistakes. And then everyone would then edit theirs on their whiteboard. And once we're happy with them, we then go to our book and write the rest of the answer.
Cool. Oh, that's a brilliant one. I love that. That would be a great one for my unit, I think. Really useful. Because they love the use of the visualiser when I'm doing it. So I think it would be great for them to see their own work under the visualiser too.
Exactly. And with it being the whiteboard, they can just wipe, gone. Cool. It's not permanent. It's something quite fluid that we can change, and that's all right.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant. Just to wrap up then, is there anyone that you could recommend for us to read a bit about, read a bit further about, or give a follow on Twitter, or any further reading for us, really? Any homework for us?
Yeah, I love Twitter, so I'm all over that. It's quite good timing, actually. So Kelly in our school, on her Twitter account, she recently shared a blog about cold calling versus mini whiteboards. You'll have to read it to see which one came out on top, but it's
you're going to say mini whiteboards.
Yeah, I'm biased. It's going to be mini whiteboards, but it just sort of summarises how we can use questioning and the tools in our classroom, because we are really fortunate at Beckfoot to have whiteboards in every classroom. So let's use them.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's just been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thanks
really,
for
really
having me.
insightful and really, really useful. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.